Welcome to the final panel of day one of LightBox in person #2. Excellent to be here. So thank you all so much for joining us in this room. Thank you for coming to this event. It feels so good to be back in person again, and we have a monster panel here for you. Please keep coming in, fill in those seats, and we are going to get going. My name is Banks. I'm here from Kitbash 3D, and I'm incredibly happy to be here. My personal passion is to help enable and inspire creators of the virtual frontier. It's what our mission is at Kitbash, and it is what I'm deeply personally passionate about. You might be saying, what are creators of the virtual frontier? And that is you all in this room and in the halls here and on the stage with us. The internet is becoming more and more, as a society, we're heading into the screens, and the people today working in movies and video games and digital art have a disproportionately massive ability to impact where we as a society go. And so for us today, my job here to help enable and inspire you all and to get the right questions out of this incredible panel that we have here, I need to ask you guys a couple questions first. So if you would, by show of hands, how many of you all are students? Excellent. All right, about 20% of the room. How many of you all are professionals, but you've been working in the industry less than 5 years? Excellent. Okay, another 25%. So the rest of you all designed the Millennium Falcon. Got it. And excellent. How many of you all consider yourself a concept artist, an environment artist, or viz dev? That's your job. Okay, great. And how many of you all would like that to be your job, and you're looking for ways to break in? Sweet. Okay. Lastly, with these panelists, to make sure that we get the right questions from, how many of you all would like to hear about their personal stories, their journeys, their trials, their challenges along the way personally to get to where they are? Okay, great. And how many of you all are looking for the technical side of this? We want to talk about the technical aspects of the art. Excellent, okay. And is there anything else that you want to make sure that we cover with this time we have? Anyone got something? Bingo. Okay, we nailed it. Well, excellent. So then, yeah, please come on down, fill in these seats. We have some more seats over here in the dark if you want to be in the cave. And there's a couple seats in here too. And the door is closed. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in. This is legit. I'm going to introduce each of our panelists here. Please hold your applause till the end. But the reason they are here is because they want to connect with you all. They have incredible careers and they want to help you guys figure out what you want to do next. And so the best validation and the best validation that we can give them to let them know they are doing that is from your energy. So please give them some energy. They can't hear us right now, and we're just going to introduce them. So when I'll cue you at the end, you'll know the point, but give them some energy here and we'll dive right into this, okay? So on the far side, we have Phil Saunders. Phil has worked on just about every movie in the Marvel MCU you can imagine. He designed the original Iron Man suit and has designed it continually throughout the series. Woo is right, we'll take some woos. We worked on Star Wars and Tron, and was part of the original Marvel Viz Dev team, which is absolutely incredible. Right next to Phil, we have Pablo Dominguez. Pablo has been a freelance artist. He's worked at ILM for several years. He worked at Marvel. He's also part of Terraform Studios. Now, sitting next to Pablo is Danar Worya. Danar's worked on Last of Us. He's worked on Shazam 2, a freelance artist, done some absolutely amazing work. Next to Danar is Pablo Carpio. Pablo has worked at just about every studio you can imagine, from Pixar to ILM and everything else around the block. Also a freelance concept artist working in the game. Right next to Pablo is Naomi Baker. Naomi has been working on the video game side as a senior illustrator for Marvel Studios. Next to Naomi is Alexander Mandradjiev, and Alexander is also at Marvel. We get some head nods. Alexander is been at Marvel as a senior illustrator there. He's also an instructor at Concept Design Academy. So, ladies and gentlemen, an enormous group here to help us understand a little bit more about how when life imitates art, concept art for movies, and video games. So please give them a warm welcome. Hey. Thank you all. Thank you all. Well, this is so exciting. Let's dive in first and let's talk just a little bit about why. I think it's really important as we kick things off in any journey that we understand why we're doing it. And Phil, maybe we could start with you. Could you give us, from your lens, why is working in movies and games important to you?
Is this thing on?
Can you hear him?
All right, excellent. First, I just wanted to correct a little bit. Naomi comes out of the video game business, but she has been working on the live action world of Marvel for a couple of years now, doing some pretty incredible, amazing stuff.
Amazing.
So,
Please. And thank you for that correction, Phil.
why does this exist? Why do we do it?
Why do you do it?
Why do I do it?
Why do you love this? You've done this for so long, and it's a journey. What keeps you in it?
Well, I come out of a particular generation of concept artists, and a lot of my friends and colleagues of a certain age all kind of have the same story, which is, well, when I was years old, I saw Star Wars for the first time, and that changed my life. And no, I'm not going to fill in the blank. But yeah, I mean, that was literally my story. I saw it. I fell in love with what I saw on the screen. It was life-changing, and I was fortunate enough to have parents who, instead of going, "Oh, well, you've got some artistic talent, maybe you can be an architect," no, they ran out in our small Canadian town to the nearest bookstore and found me the Star Wars sketchbooks, and I copied every single page out of those books, probably, 4 or 5 times. Sold them for $1 to my classmates in elementary school. Oh, gave a little away there. But yeah, I mean, I was just passionate about it, passionate about the storytelling, passionate about, imagining the future. I mean, that's really what it was for me, is what's the future going to look like? Can I be a part of making that? Who's next?
Well, and I'd love right next to you, Pablo Dominguez. You've gotten to work on Star Wars yourself. Yeah. What was it for you that made you want to dive in here?
Well, it's a very similar story as Phil. In my case, it's like when I saw the behind the scenes of episode 3, I saw an image of George Lucas pointing some drawings on a wall, and I was like, oh, that's somebody, that's something, that's a job, it's something I really want to do it. And then I was, looking at the internet and how is this industry working, and then I just jumped right on it and looking all the images I could. I just be able to buy, some of the art of the Star Wars books, and it was really similar to Phil, I have to say. I think many of us have a similar background, based on the Star Wars designs in this case. Also, Lord of the Rings came out, and they have a really nice art book too.
Would you all agree with this, that the idea of seeing something magical on screen gave you the passion and excitement to dive in? And so if we feel that, and Alexander, maybe this is one for you, when you think about talking to some of your students, it's not an easy road to go from, hey, I like watching Star Wars, to, hey, I want to work on Star Wars, or any project for that matter. What is the first step?
I think first step, the way I see it and the way I try to relate to my students, at least when I talk to them about that, is to really be honest with what you do, what you're creating as an artist, and finding that thing you love and sticking to that, because along the way, I feel like you lose track learning academics, learning technical aspects, training through a variety of mentors, going through schools and being influenced by other artists. But then in the end, what's important is to remember what you actually used to love. And that usually ends up being the strength in your work. After you've accumulated a certain amount of skill throughout many years, you sort of, sometimes you can feel a little lost, like, I don't know if this is the direction I want to go into. I think that's what it is. It's like, what was it about when I was young and carefree about how good I was and all that shit? What was it about that I really loved? Was it about drawing comic book characters? What was the core of that? And when you reunite yourself after you've had that mileage covered, it's magic. It just melts together, and you start making leaps with your work as well. Answer the question.
Oh yeah, it's so beautiful and important, I think, to remind ourselves of why in the hard moments of how did we get into this, or why did we choose this. Danar, I've heard you talk about this subject so much, and I think you have such a really unique lens on how do you keep yourself engaged. And it's not every day that working on the biggest project is the most fun thing. How do you stay in a way that you can maintain your focus and your discipline to do the work?
I think one of the most important things about doing art, I think any professional sport or whatever where you have to compete, is feeling confident. And I noticed my confidence level wasn't that high because I was only focusing on art. So when my art didn't go well, my day was shit. I couldn't focus, and I felt bad because my only input of feeling good was if my art went good. And what I noticed the past year is when I venture off into other creative parts, actually adds up to my art because, I'm going out, meeting with friends, that kind of builds up my confidence. I'm taking guitar lessons, builds it up a bit. I'm doing that, I'm doing this. And once I do art, that confidence level is so high that the insecurities in me don't come up as fast as they used to.
So it's a process of going through it and finding things outside of it.
It's not like the way to grow, I think, in anything, let's say in my art career, it's not only making moves in art, it's also making moves in life. So it's not like one line going up, it's like kind of zigzag. Mm-hmm. And noticing when to make a move in life and when to make a move in art is very important. So for me, if I spent like 7-8 months just doing work, I'm like, if I add 2 more projects to it, it's not gonna add any beneficial things to my personal life. So because I've done this, let me figure out the other side so that at the end it kind of like comes up.
Mm-hmm. Do all of you do personal work also?
Yeah.
Sometimes, Phil?
I do writing.
Writing?
My personal work.
What kind of stuff do you write?
Screenplays.
Yeah. Super cool, right? Anyone else write in the free time? Love that. I think writing can be such an amazing way to connect your mind to your hand, Naomi, when you're working on a project, when you're diving into something at Marvel, where do you seek inspiration from? We got Mike's working on it. Yep. Yeah.
Thank you. Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind as far as where I seek inspiration when I'm at work is reference, like looking for references. Most things at Marvel start from, there's usually the original version. So diving into that character or that area's story is where I get a lot of inspiration, like their personality or what they wear, their relationships with other characters in the universe. I think mostly it's diving into their stories and reading up and doing the research.
And do you put together vision boards and things like that?
I do eventually. At first, if I do have the time, it's a lot of reading and starting to get excited about the character. or some aspect if I don't like them, which is rare. But anyway, you can start to concept while I'm reading up about them, and then the mood boards come. Yeah.
Danar, you look like you had something you want to add?
I think one of the things. So you asked what my inspirations are, right? I think one of the things that's super important, and I remember I was like 12 or 13, and there was this song coming out, and it was an Eminem song, and he was rapping like saying like. He's mixing Biggie and Pac and mixing up in the pot, sprinkle a little Big L inside. What the fuck do you got? You got the illest and realest killers. And I'm like, it was so cool. At that time, I thought that was cool. But now, growing up and being an artist myself, I kind of figured like, yeah, that's the trick. Is like looking at your younger self and what inspired you, and have like a big pot and kind of mix it up. You know, like, all right, like this element of Akira, that part of Terminator 2 did something to me. This did something to me, and if I mix it up together, I love hip hop. So if I mix that up together, what do I get? So I don't necessarily just look at images for inspiration. I also look at attitude in some artists, because that's also inspiring to me. The way they behave, the way they move, the way they do art, and I think it's really important to not just look at images, but kind of like she said, to kind of really delve into it and starting to create that world in your own head before you start the image. Yeah.
Love that. Pablo Carpio, how's that for you? When you think at the beginning of a process, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
I don't know. I mean, for me, it depends on the project I'm working on. Also depends if I'm like working for a client or doing personal art. My pipeline changes a tiny bit depending also on the time that I have. So, but yeah, most of the time I also work like Naomi. I just, try to find my references. It's also like, I think that at a certain point you already have like your own library in your head after so many years, and after having like been working in different projects, that there are certain things that are already like, it's like learning a language, I guess. Like you already, so. I don't really know how to explain it, but yeah, there are certain times that I will not even like look for references until I'm already like inside of the pipeline. It's not like a thing that I do that at the beginning, but just happens like during the whole process, and it like helps me develop the thing while I'm working on it. So it kind of depends. But yeah.
I think it's so valuable to hear that from you all, that even at this level, it's seeking outside inspiration, making it almost like a visual spice rack, where you're pulling things together and making your own thing from other things that influence us. I think there's such a desire to be original, right? And there's this want to make something wholly our own. And you all work on so many projects that have an existing lineage in the franchise, and you're going to contribute to it, where you have that, or even as you're saying, Pablo, on your personal work.
Yeah, and sometimes it's also as Danar say, it's not only about images or other artists that you like. Like sometimes it's just something as abstract as a color palette or a song or stuff like that. It doesn't have anything to do with like. It's not like you have to like design a spaceship and you only look at spaceships. You look at other stuff. You look at nature. You look at like textures, colors, or whatever it is. And yeah, I think you need to learn how to expand like the way you like visualize things to really get things that you wouldn't expecting from.
Totally.
Different things in life. So.
Please, yeah.
I think another thing that's super important is I steal a lot, but I steal really smart, like a lot. The way I make images is like, all right, I like this composition, I'm gonna do that. Oh, I like this lighting, I'm gonna do that. Oh yeah, I like that color grading, I'm gonna do that. And I know in the beginning I start to steal, but I know like my artist inner self will eventually kind of change it up a bit. And then at the end, it will be my own. It's kind of like, I look at it as like how producers in hip hop kind of sample older songs and make a new beat out of it. So I'm kind of looking at it that way, because I'm like, people already fixed that issue for me. Like a lot of times when I get a briefing or something, I go immediately to the first thing that's in my head. And it's like, let's say there's like a underground prison, and it kind of like it's in the Middle Ages, whatever. My first thought is like, oh yeah, I remember Lord of the Rings. There was this lighting scenario. I think that's beautiful if I just take that whole color grading and everything. So I already figured that out, and then I'll figure out what the client actually wants within that image. So I'm just making it super easy for myself.
Super cool. Well, Phil, let's dive in a little bit more on the technical side of things. When you begin a project, what is your process? Not an inspiration, but what do you physically do at if we can talk about this too, at Marvel? How does the work come to you? When does it start? What does that even look like? And then what are your first couple steps?
Well, I guess it depends on what the project is and what stage we're brought in. I mean, I'm brought in on projects all the way from the first conception of what the project could be, before there's a director or a writer or anything on the project sometimes. And other times I'm brought in post-production. So, I mean, it varies based on the kind of assignment it is. But generally for me, it always starts with the story. I feel like the job that we have, and frankly the job of every aspect of filmmaking, is to service the story. And when you get even more granular, it's servicing the characters, because there's no story without character, and that's the thing that we emotionally connect to. I think of filmmaking as an emotional medium rather than a primarily intellectual one. And a visceral medium. And so if there is a script, that's the first thing that I will dive into. And I will, even if I'm only working on one little part of it, I want to read the entire script because I want to know the context. I want to know when I'm designing something, and it doesn't even have to be a character or a costume or a keyframe or something that, it could be a prop. To me, that is an opportunity to convey something about character and convey something about story. If you think about it, a movie does not have a lot of time to convey an enormous amount of information. So every single aspect of that movie has to serve multiple masters, right? I mean, you can't have an expositional scene that's just explaining, the politics of the universe or the relationship between the haves and the have-nots in this dystopian world, or what a character just went through. All of these things are conveyed in little ways, primarily through a visual medium, right? The dialogue is reserved truly for moving story forward and expressing character. So everything else that you are seeing and you're hearing has to do the job of building the world for you in this unconscious background way. So that's the first thing that I look at. I'll look at the story. I'll try to immerse myself in the whole story, or as much as I'm allowed to see of it. And from that comes little details. So, I'll jump into Iron Man suits. In Captain America: Civil War, there was a shift in the relationship between characters. Iron Man was effectively the antagonist in that story rather than the protagonist. So, we went from what was a very smooth, organic suit in the previous movie to, okay, let's make him a little bit more angular. Let's bulk him up, make him a little bit of a boxer, bruiser kind of proportion. And then let's do some interesting things with the face. The face is far more aggressive. There's a subtle suggestion of furrowed brow. There's a little bit more angle in the eyes and stuff. So this is all, very, very subconscious kind of stuff. Another example, the Tony Stark's bedroom in the original Iron Man. That bedroom looks like it was set up by a interior decorator. There's nothing personal in that bedroom. It is you know, if you'll excuse the pun, very stark. There are no family photos, there are no mementos or anything, right? The minute you go down into his garage, the basement, all of a sudden there's pictures of him with his dad, there's all kinds of trophies and little knickknacks and stuff like that, and it tells you that this is where this guy actually lives. You know, he may not even sleep in that bedroom, but it tells you an enormous amount about this character, about his emotional state, about who he is and his relationship to his environment. So for me, it's always about starting with the script, starting with the story.
Love that. And love the thought of just listening to you talk about the details and understanding how much thought you put into each piece of it. Naomi and Alexander, in the same regard, when you were, Naomi, you mentioned thinking about the character first and trying to understand the character. Are there some examples that come to mind, similar to what Phil was talking about, where you're trying to dive into the world and understand the nuanced pieces of it and then build from those ideas? Do you, what is your approach when you mentioned thinking about the character, and when you want to dive into a character, can you talk just about understanding nuance or even thinking about a particular time where you took a piece of nuance and from a page or from a brief and put it up into your work?
Oh gosh, well, I can't expand on that as far as Marvel is concerned. But before this, I was in video games for a really long time. And the latest game that I worked on was Ghost of Tsushima. And as far as delving into the story of one of the characters, Phil brought up props, which is kind of an unsung hero in like the world of developing a character.
Can everybody hear Naomi, by the way?
Maybe just a little closer. Yeah.
I just don't want them to miss anything you're saying. It's all really.
Is this a bit better? Oh, this is way better.
Yeah, and just keep it a little closer. Yeah. Thanks, Naomi.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So yeah, I was saying Phil mentioned props, which is great. They're kind of an unsung hero of developing a character in the world. So in Ghost of Tsushima, it's feudal Japan, samurai, ronin, and things like this. There's a character where I delved into. I was working on a prop. I was working on his katana, and working on the katanas, I watched so many videos. I could probably maybe not make one, but I know every part of it. And in that culture, when they were making those, every aspect of the sword, like, I don't know if the name's Japanese. Anyway, trust me. I know. But every aspect of the katanas, they're in the like high level, like more royalty, not like the common folks, but every aspect of that weapon has a story behind it, and those stories are familial, based off of maybe existing stories in that culture. And so it was really fun to know that that's how they made or approached their weapons, or the katanas. And that allowed me to make up my own narrative for the character, and then infuse things like maybe an animal like a fox, put that, maybe the fur or a fox motif somewhere on the sword, and continue from there, like develop, depending on the story that I made up for the character. And that was really fun. Come up with cool stories and get inspired by their existing stories, and come up with your own and infuse it into different aspects of them.
Pablo Dominguez, much of your work is focused on the environment. And you've worked both in a studio and as a freelancer. Let's talk about it from the freelance side, outside of the studio. When you get a brief, what does that actually look like at the highest levels for you?
Actually, the briefs, since I've been working mostly in movies, inside the studio and outside the studio, they look very similar. Normally on video games, they are even more long, the briefs. Sometimes the briefs have like 100 pages, not joking. It's called like the Bible, and you have to read everything and just watch all the reference. And in the movies, sometimes you have a lot of reference too from the director, from the production designer, or the art director in the movie. And one thing I normally do when I start, I read the script, and I read, as Phil said, a part of the script they allow you to read. I just try to think about the story, and then what I normally do just to please the first ideas, and then before just starting to build something in 3D or something very complicated, what I try to do is just sketch using that reference. Even though sometimes references are low resolution or watermark and stuff like that, but I just try to eliminate and just do composition and paintings using directly the reference from the directors or the production designers, and they normally, in my experience, they normally click when you use them because you are using what they like. You're not just getting inspiration from an image and then recreating it. You're just using directly that image and just modifying it a little bit and painting on top. And then when you have that, you start buying when you already sell that first idea. It's really rough. Normally, it's not a beautiful image, let's say, but it sells the idea. And when I hit that point, let's say, I normally start with the shapes, and then I start building some shapes. And actually, it's a technique Pablo and I we developed for the Captain Marvel movie. We did like a lot of kit pass pieces personalized for that movie. So every piece in some way was designed based on the refs from the producing designer and the director. So we will be building everything just with the same shapes and the same kind of kit we created based on that reference. I think that's answered the question.
Yeah, we actually, me not for that much because I was like a really, really short period of time, but you also did that for Rings of Power, right?
Yeah.
Kind of. But we kind of did it or keep us in that way.
Yeah, on Rings of Power. I don't know if Julian is around here. He told me he was going to be here. He was working with me in that project. And we did like literally hundreds of houses, arches, small stuff from the producing design from Ramsey, just to develop, the look of Numenor in the movie. It was mainly what I was doing in that show, just to look at Numenor and some of the keyframes at the first episodes, but mainly was, we had like a huge assets for Numenor, and it was really easy to work on because as soon as you have all of that, you already have the power just to render something quick and show some compositions, lighting, and then once the director or the production designer is happy, you can finalize the pieces and make a pretty image, which is always it's always good.
Just adding what he mentioned about Captain Marvel, we actually worked on that way. Like when we got the references from the production designer, but like for example, we were working on all the world building for the Kree civilization. So that was from making architecture to vehicles to whatever it was. So there was already some work done on costume design. So we took some references from that and tried to apply the same style to the buildings and everything. Same happened, for example, with the materials they were using for construction or for doing the spaceships and everything. So as soon as we kind of when we found a formula that worked in that way, we were applying that for absolutely everything. So there were even maybe sometimes that we will design a few buildings, and from those ones, the one that were not rejected, we will just reuse those ones as part of a spaceship, for example, so everything keeps having the same style and vibe. So yeah, that's how we ended figuring out.
And also you sometimes have happy creative accidents with the directors, the creatives, as Pablo was saying. So one of the spaceships actually in the movie was one of the buildings. He just turned it.
I just flipped it.
He flipped it and he's like, "That's my spaceship."
Yeah, and it worked, and he liked it that way. It wasn't working as a building, but at some point I just turned it and it worked as a spaceship. So it ended being.
Love that. Love that. Well, and when you're working in that capacity as a freelance concepts artist, how much communication, as you're building out the workflow that you just described, how much communication are you having with the client? Are these things you're doing on your own and showing them, or is it a collaborative process the whole way?
Depends on the client. Sometimes the client is like really talkative and really want to be like, you know, involved in the process. Also having meetings either like daily or, you know, even a few times a day. And sometimes, you know, there is also like, there are like different like strats of people, let's say that way. So between the production designer, you got an art director, and under the art director, you have a supervisor, and then, you know. So it kind of depends on the project, but yeah, most of the time, I would say that the communication is pretty, you know, fluent, and yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to answer that. It depends on the project, you know. Sometimes, yeah, like sometimes you get like all the ideas done, and once you have something finalized, you show it to him, you know. But most of the time, even for yourself, it's better to start like showing things, even if it's just work in progress, to make sure that you don't work more than necessary on something that later on is not gonna work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah, and that's something you figure out by yourself, actually, you know. After creating this relationship with your client, you need to figure out how much you want to show to him, and like how much is like necessary, you know, to make actually the work more productive, you know.
Well, and we have a lot of people in the room that are looking to break in, that want to get to that next level. What do you think were some of the most powerful things in the process for you to get in? Like when you look back at I was trying to get from I have a strong portfolio to I'm now a professional at this. What were some of the things that unlocked the door for you? And Danar, you look like you got it.
For sure, going to workshops for me.
Yeah, I was gonna mention networking.
Workshops, yeah. There's a difference between emailing with somebody and actually meeting them in person. And face value is always the best. Avatar proved that the first one did shit the first week, and then people talked about it, and then it became the #1 movie. So for sure, it's always better to meet that person, because outside of doing art, we're also human beings, and you like to meet nice people. And outside, next to that, yeah, it's like I said, it's like playing Elden Ring, right? You have your character and you have all the stats, but you can't go all the stats because that takes too long, right? And you want to defeat the first boss, so you have to pick like, all right, what am I? Am I like the strength character? Am I dexterity? So with that, I mean like, am I character designer? Do I like environments? And as soon as you pick one area out of the art world, right, and you get good at that, and you decide to learn art and all the rules through this. So I decided to learn it through environments. As soon as you learn the logics of it, shape, language, whatever, you can later apply that to anything else, because you found the easiest way for you to understand the logics, and then you apply it. And once you get there, by the way, like sometimes I've watched tutorials and then I rewatched them 5-6 years later, so I'm like, whoa, you said this and I didn't get that. That was because I wasn't ready yet to hear it. So it's really important to always grow, but not only in art, but also in personal life, because I think your art reflects who you are as a person. And if you're in a bad time in your life, you're not going to make good art. At least that's my opinion. So I don't know if that answered it.
No, totally. I think it's so important to focus on the full piece of it. Alexander, when you think about advice to people breaking in, what do you think is the first thing that comes to your mind?
I mean, Pablo said it pretty well, is human interaction, any type of interaction. But man, breaking in, I think it's different nowadays, especially with how much more variety there is. And it's almost like the ability to expose yourself is an overwhelming amount of information on top of information, and especially with the tools that are out, with AI creeping on the horizon, and people are just producing so much more work. And so when it comes to jumping into the industry for film, And if you have no roof over your head, or if you don't have people to encourage you or support you, it's like you have to, you kind of have to bite the wolf on its leg, so to speak. Because it's the only way, and you have to attack with your imagination. You have to start producing as much work in that direction. And the good thing is, unlike back in the day, now you can share it on so many different platforms. And I was, I hope that made sense.
Yeah.
Because I was saying the overwhelming amount of blah, 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 whatever I said, I don't know. But I mean that as in you can really drown out in that massive stream of art. You could really sort of, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but you can be forgotten or missed. So like, I always thought about what landed me when I talked to my class, for example, what landed me in the place for me to have the opportunity. It's actually, I went through a stage with my art where I gave up on myself and then realized what I needed to do. But it took that crash psychologically to find out, well, this is all I got. And that thing that remained was the thing I loved to do, like project images in a cinematic way. And then I reacquainted myself with movies and music and the mood and the feeling and how to connect. I understood that somehow. It was ingrained in me. It's probably because I grew up watching a lot of films. And sorry, I'm ranting.
No, this was great.
Lost. But yeah, it's a matter of like really. It's weird. You isolate yourself. It's very unhealthy for a human being to do that because we need people. We need reassurance. We need, we need communication. We need love, right? And then you, as an artist, to get to where you want, you kind of lock yourself in a room mentally or physically. I don't know. I've done it physically, and you get to where you need to be, no matter what. Because the mentality, and this is kind of, you hear it a lot. The mentality, it's either that or nothing else. It's either, and that pushes you further and further. So, with that same power and mentality, you break through. I think you get noticed. I don't know what it's like today, though. That was my time.
Well,
So-
I think that's really powerful to hear, just that I think there's this idea that some people are just born with it and success happens for those who are graced with it. But to hear that someone at your level can go through the pain and the crash, as you described, and emerge from it, I think is really valuable for everyone, because we want to believe that this road to being an artist in Marvel projects is caked with chocolate and gold cheers. But I think that it's really cool to hear that the stairway to success is steps of failure and steps of learning and steps of growth.
Constantly. And even to this very day, there are times where I'm like, man, I'm telling myself this, I'm on fire. I'm knocking everything out of the park. And then something comes along where it completely crushes your thing, whatever, ego, whatever. You crash and you're like, I guess I've been doing crap all this time. Why didn't anybody tell me anything? So that's a good thing, because that is a thing where when you get past that, not only do you improve with your art, but you improve as a person, as a character. You learn how to behave, even though I still behave like a kid sometimes. When things don't go my way, I throw a temper tantrum, punch holes through my door. No, I'm just kidding. But it's
They're very mild temper tantrums.
very,
Very quiet. You wouldn't even notice it if you're in the same room. It's all internal with them. I think it's important to mention, by the way, all this talk about, success. Success is not a destination. Success is a process. There is no point where you've made it, right? And all of a sudden everything is going to be smooth sailing. It's all the same. There is no this side of the line and that side of the line. You may have done something of significance that people have noticed. Your phone may be ringing more often than it used to, but the process is still the same. The anxiety, it never leaves you, right? I mean, this is being an artist is being an artist, whether you've got nothing under your belt or 20 movies or 100 movies or 100 projects or whatever. It's every single blank page is still a blank page, and if you're doing it right, every single thing is something new, right? Even if it's designing the same, two-legged, two-armed metal guy, it's always something different. It's always a new challenge, and there's the fear that comes with that. And the only real difference between you as a beginner and somebody else as a veteran is that you have the comfort of, well, I didn't know how I was going to get there the last 100 times. And somehow I managed to get there. Therefore, I guess I'll manage this time too. So I might as well just dive in. And that's really the only difference. So,
Yeah, to add to that, one thing that anybody who wants to be professional has the upper hand above us is one of the challenges after being professional, working a couple of years, is like still maintaining the love that you have for it when you started. That's like the biggest challenge. It's most of my art friends from my own generation. That's what they kind of struggle with now. Is like, I don't like it anymore. So, and I think it's such a shame because we are in our prime years of artistic making and like coming up with creative ideas and everything. And like Phil said, it's not I learned that with The Last of Us 2. I think I called Max at that time, and Last of Us 2 came out, and I was expecting like, yeah, fuck yeah, bro, you made it. I can go on the boat, go to the Elven land. But
It's over for me.
the kind of the entail, and like Phil said, sure, more calls and everything, but the entail came and that kind of disappeared, and you kind of noticed like this is just a good journey that I'm just walking towards.
Yeah.
And this time, I'm walking towards Madrid, and once I'm there, I'll figure out where I'm gonna walk towards next. And there's no destination. That's like one of the first things. And the only joy I have working on the projects is saying yes to it. And as soon as I say yes, the stress is like, holy shit, how am I gonna fuck, I don't know how and really to see all these qualities that you guys see from these amazing artists here is most of them learned it through work. So I wasn't this good before I started. You can never get that. The level that you see, that you look up to, that actually happens. You learn a shit ton when you work because you're under pressure and you don't have time to, like, oh my fucking God. Like you really have to go for it. And yeah, I rarely enjoy it, and I always have sleepless nights. And one way to fix that is, I had this issue once with this image for Last of Us, and I couldn't sleep. And I was calling my friend, and he's like, man, just sleep on it, and I'm pretty sure you'll know it the next morning. And I did that, and I did. And I figured out, okay, so my brain is like a full charged battery of a phone. Mm-hmm. And the more it goes throughout the day, the less I can come up with good ideas and think very sharp, right? Because the percentage is going down. So I need to know how do I make as much as possible within that frame that I'm very sharp at. So kind of to know your own process and trusting in yourself. And that's like the hardest thing to tell an artist is like, hey man, say you're good to yourself. It's like, no, you are good though. That's the conversation.
There's a recurring theme here that this is a process. And I think that's what each one of you have said, that at varying levels and varying places in our careers in all walks of this room, that the process is the journey, as Phil just said. There is no end point to this, and it never gets to that place where that feeling goes away. Or as Danar was just saying, if that feeling does escape you for a moment, take a break rather than trying to jam through it. Or sometimes, as Alexander reminds us, you got to just put it down. And that's, I think, really powerful, deep words for us all to take in and remember that regardless of where you are on the journey, that is where you are. And that's an exciting thing. It feels like something we almost intuitively understand.
I mean, art is like having a relationship. You know, you can't spend too much time together because you'll get annoyed by it. You have to take a break, you know, you have to go on vacation, you have to talk to each other, hey, what's up, what's wrong? So it's really, it is like, I see it like a relationship, really. It's a love thing, right? You create, you love it, but you also have to, sometimes let it go and don't be too attached to it because he's gonna grow up, and he's gonna come out in the cinema, and it's not yours anymore. So I really look at it that way because it just makes it easier to me.
Yeah.
Because if I look at it just as a product, I'm not enjoying life. Yeah.
Well, it is the end of the day, so we are allowed to go a little bit later in this room than the time scheduled, and I do want to make sure that we get time for any questions in the audience. But one last thing I'd love to talk about is you guys mentioned the importance of going to workshops and the importance of putting yourself out there and the importance of going after the thing that you want. What advice do you guys have for this audience about tonight and for the rest of this workshop? We're in the room or we're in the hallways with artists like yourselves and people that we want to be seen by. How best to approach that? What are some of the best practices, and what are some things to avoid if you see that artist tonight at the bar, or you see that art director in the hallway tomorrow, and you want to show them your portfolio or connect with them? How best to do that?
Try not to. You're not here to get better at art right now. You're here to take it in so you can get better later. And the way I look at workshops is every time I felt demotivated, I live in the Netherlands, I went to a workshop and it's like, so this is what I use it for. It's kind of like a recharging of energy because I'm see all these great artists here just walking around doing, regular stuff, and I can just do regular stuff with them. And I like that, because I always see them as gods and stuff online. So it's really great to see oh shit, he's also human. He poops and piss like me. It's a good, for me, it was a good.
Maybe not quite as well.
I'm a pro poop and pisser, yeah.
Yeah, I would say. Was someone going to talk? Were you going to talk? Oh, it's on me. Okay. No, I was just going to say that. Yeah, I mean. Yes, what Danar say, but yeah, don't be shy. Always, approach anyone you want to talk with. Always do it in a polite way. Make sure you find the right moment. If that person is talking with someone else, maybe find another moment or just wait for it. But yeah, remember that we are here for you guys. They invited us to serve you in some sort of way. So never feel like you are. I mean, of course, there might be a moment you're interrupting, but in the end, there is always a way to approach someone, and if you've got a question or something, just go for it. But at the same time, as Danar say, just remind that you're not going to get absolutely everything in 2 minutes or or in a 10-minute conversation. So make sure that, I mean, I don't really know.
Yeah.
Just don't try to go for always the final, answer about how to figure out life. How do I get a job at ILM? Well, I don't know, dude. It's just, it takes time and it takes work and it takes, so yeah, I don't know. Just try to understand what's your situation right now and what's your next step rather than how can I, just figure out the final, destination instead of maybe you're just starting right now and you're something more smarter for you will be thinking, okay, which kind of program should I be using? Do you think it's better to work on ZBrush for this type of, artworks, or is it Blender, or I don't know, stuff like that, rather than, as I said, can you get me a job at Terraform? Well,
I also think for people who don't think in steps or logistic ways, it's just go with your gut feeling. If you go to somebody, you talk to him, it didn't feel good. Well, you tried. you know, that's the only thing you can do. You can try.
Yeah, and at the same time, like if you get like, I mean, don't put too much pressure on yourself on the feedback. You know, if you want feedback, make sure that you understand what does that mean and which type of feedback do you want to get. If you just want someone to check your work and you want to, you know, show off and brag about it, go for it. But understand that if you really want like honest feedback and someone tells you to change something, don't take it as something negative, or, you know, don't let it like, don't take it personal, or let it, you know, depress you in some sort of way, you know. Always understand that there's a learning curve, and any type of comment, it's always, you know, appreciated in any kind of way, either if it's positive or negative. It's going to help you grow. So yeah.
And everyone, mostly we have different ways to start in the industry. I mean, I rarely know two guys who have like exactly the same history, or step by step, you do this, you're gonna get it. In my case, it was so random that when I get my first job on, one of my first jobs on Game of Thrones, it was my mom talking with a girl in the street, so it was something like that, you know. So,
Yeah, tell the story.
yeah, it's a crazy story, but yeah.
I want to hear it too.
Now, let's say she had one of my paintings in the phone, and she was talking with her, and she was like, "Oh, that's a cool painting." And basically, she was like, "Oh, I work on a VFX company working for this type of movies, and that's kind of the job we are finding for. So if it's your son, just tell him to call me, and we can have a interview." That was it.
It was the trick. My mom should have went to LA, not me. They're wasting money.
Yeah.
That's like, well, just extending that.
He's such a nice boy.
Extending that story, actually, Pablo and I got the job for Captain Marvel because our supervisor was walking on the street on Barcelona.
Yeah, and he found.
And she found a concept art studio, kind of. I mean, it was like an institute or like a workshop, something like that. And she went inside and asked, like, "Hey, like, is there like professional concept artists working here?" And she was like, "No, this is more like students and stuff. It's just, you know, like a place for learning, like a private school for concept art and stuff." But the guy that was working there knew us, and he was like, "But I do actually know a couple of guys that lives in Madrid, you know, and they could like maybe move here to Barcelona," and that's how we got it. So once again, that came from networking on another event. That's where we met this guy. Suddenly, it was being in the right place in the right moment. So
I don't know about you guys. I'm gonna go to Barcelona. I feel like what is happening, man? I'm working my ass off, emails, everything. These guys just on the street. Hey,
yeah, want to work on Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Eventually.
Hey, George Lucas, what are you doing here?
That's the way. Just walk on the street is the way.
Well, incredible advice there. Have fun with this. Don't swing for the fences here. Don't close the deal in your first 3 minutes of talking with someone.
You can try with me though.
Yeah, close the deal with Danar. But this is a community. Digital art is an unbelievable global community that you are part of, and treat it as a lifelong career. If you're serious about this, build relationships here. Have fun, as they're saying. Connect with people. Put yourself out there. And know that if you're serious about this, it's going to be a long process over years and build relationships. So in the vein of putting ourselves out there, let's get some questions from the audience. Danar, could I have that wireless?
Yes, sir.
All right, who's got one? Put yourself out there, right here. Bam, in the front row. Question on?
Yeah, it's on.
It's on? Okay.
Hot mic.
So I was wondering, because you were talking about, balancing life with your art. At what point do you put the pen down? Like, is there a moment or like a situation where like, okay, nothing's coming out, my work's bad, I'm tired. Like,
Oh yeah,
you get to that point?
What you said. As soon as I know, like, all right, today's not my day. I try to procrastinate in a functional sense. If that makes sense. So let's say I have to make an environment. Yeah, like I have to make an environment, and there's a design in that environment, right? But I'm like, all right, I can't come up with the design, so I might as well just make the environment. So I start like making a mountain, making the composition, whatever, so that even while I'm procrastinating, I'm still doing work to the stuff that I already know how to figure out within the image. And if that didn't even happen, I just stop because I'll trust myself that I know what to do tomorrow morning. I have a bad sleep, that's okay, but you wake up tomorrow and then you hope you figure it out. Yeah, it's a personal thing. Like this is the thing, like you have to get punched like 3,000 times in your face before you're like, all right, now I can like take a punch. You know what I mean? Like you have to get punched first to know how to evade it later, right? It's kind of like boxing, so I've taken a lot of beating.
I would just say also, I mean, there are tricks. I mean, I try to work on more than one thing at the same time so that if I'm stumped on one thing, I can just say, okay, I'm going to switch on to the other thing. You solve a different problem, it uses a different part of your brain, and in the process of doing that, all of a sudden, the other problem gets unstuck. So, I wouldn't say, I mean, if you're having a real emotional, blockage in just like literally you just, you pick up the Wacom pen and it burns your hand, then definitely walk away. But otherwise, just find some way to do some other aspect of the job, and carry you through that, that gap in your motivation or whatever, and then you can always switch back.
Awesome.
I take a nap every time I feel stressed or I feel like I can't fix something, and I take like a 20-minute nap. That means like as soon as it hits 20, you kind of fall asleep, you wake up. But it really helps to kind of reset my brain and my insecurities that I kind of feel. So I do that, or if I have 2 projects, I take a walk or clean up the house. So my thought just goes somewhere else, so that I just delete that whole, idea, and then I could start fresh. So it's like what Phil said, you just have to figure out, if it's not burning, you have to figure out like, all right, if I'm not feeling good, how do I still do my work efficiently? And switching off is one of the things as well.
Awesome. And another question over here. Please stand so they can see you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you guys for being so generous with all the information you're sharing. Super helpful for me and everyone else here, I'm sure. My question is to those of you who have experience in both. If you could describe what it's like, going from games to film as a concept artist.
For me, for example, the experiences in general in games, you have more time to do stuff, and they normally they let you work around a little bit more ideas. But in general, for me, it's kind of like the same job in both of them. Just sometimes in games you have more time. That's the only thing I found.
Yeah, like video games. I mean, depends on the video game, I guess, but at least on my experience, projects tends to be more flexible just because the deadlines used to be longer. Also, yeah, like movies tend to like last sometimes from like a year to 2 years or something like that, when a video game can take like 4 or 5 years. So you tend to have like also more time for finishing your work. You have time to do more polished images, But yeah, in general, as Pablo said, it ends being pretty much the same. When you get a strong pipeline and you know how to do your work, it doesn't really care if they give you like 5 days or 2. You already like measure how much time you need to spend on each part of the process to get it done. And then in terms of like, I'm not sure if your question was going in the direction of like how to jump from one industry to the other. Was it that way or I can answer to that too if you want. Yeah, no, but because I got that question sometimes, like how, like from people that has been all the time, like all their career, like working on video games, like, and they ask like, how do you make the step or the change to the film industry or the opposite? Since I've been pretty much just working as a freelance, there is not really like an answer for that. I would say that it just depends on the type of work that you have on your portfolio too. I mean, my work is actually not that. I mean, it's realistic and it's polished, but it's it's kind of loose sometimes. Like I tend to do, and I also tend to do like cinematic keyframes and stuff like that. Not that anymore, but I used to do that for a while, and that was what got me also in the film industry. And again, it also has to do with contacts in the end, and that's something that you do in events and stuff like that. So eventually, I got the chance to start working on the film industry, and that's where I started like getting all my contacts, and then just from the stuff that I was posting online, I got a few options, like a few offers to work on video games. So that's how it happened to me. But yeah.
Naomi, you just made the switch pretty recently.
Yeah, exactly. Naomi might have like a way better answer for that.
Yeah.
Do I just get close to this? Okay. Let me scoot up. So I've been working with Marvel, or film, I guess in general, just for 2 years. So nothing I've worked on has come out. So I can definitely speak on the video game aspect. I did want to add that in a in-studio sense, a major difference from my experiences in video games, I was able to, or there's an opportunity to collaborate with different departments, even like sound and sometimes programming. Maybe programming won't allow you to do something because you painted something super elaborate or 3D. And then from my experience in film, it's not really the case. And that's not good or bad. It's just different. So in film, it's mostly, I don't touch anything with sound or anything like that. And actually, the idea of an art department is interesting to me because what I do in VizDev is character design and keyframe. And then there's like an art department that does all like backgrounds and builds the world. So, so in video games in the studio, they like do the whole thing, you know, for the most part. And in film, it's I find that it's while you collaborate maybe with less departments, the vision for the most part is very strong. It's like there's the director or writer who has that vision, and everyone comes together to kind of have some input, but generally go towards that vision. And video games, there is a vision most of the time. You know, there's a general vision.
Most of the time.
You know, but as a concept artist, you're able to maybe have a little bit more input on a small aspect of a character or even environment story-wise, or even a major part you might be able to, if it's not written in fully. It just seems a bit more collaborative, yet like anything, when there's so many cooks in the kitchen, it may take longer and the end product comes much lower. So, yeah.
I think you're also having a very unique experience because the separation between visual development and art department is entirely unique to Marvel. Other studios don't have anything like the visual development department that Marvel does, where they sort of separate the stuff that's about building the sets and the stuff that's about telling the story in a way. So, I mean, you know, because the art department also does keyframes, but sort of what I sort of think of as the breaking point between VizDev and art department is if the main characters are really, really small in the image, that's art department. If the characters are really, really big in the image, that's visual development. And from my experience, having been with Marvel from the very, very beginning, it was significantly more collaborative and interactive between departments at the beginning. But like with any company, once it gets to a certain size, you know, it just gets really hard.
Awesome. We got. Yeah.
I also had something to add. I had a unique experience where I worked on The Last of Us 2 and I worked on the HBO Last of Us TV show. So I can kind of like compare the two. And only on the last one I worked for like 3 weeks. And I thought like, oh, well, cool, Last of Us, that's like, fuck, like I'm like, let's go, bro. And as soon as I started, I figured like, oh wow, this is why Last of Us was so great, at least with gaming, is you work so long on it, you actually delve into the project. And man, I could like make a great image in like 2-3 days back in that time, like on my prime, when you're just doing that project and really delving into the world. And I thought I still had it, but as soon as I went onto it again, I'm like, whoa, this really, like, I need to get back into it. And with film, it's so, like, for me, the definition of production is film. Like, most of the directors or whatever, they don't see a difference between like a 6 or a 10, you know what I mean? Because it's not about that for them. Like, it's really functionality that works, and like, do you help me out solve this problem? So I guess I went from a concept artist to a problem solver as soon as I worked on films, because it's like quick the whole time. And you want to produce quality at the same time as well, of course.
Super cool thoughts. We have time for one last question here.
I think this actually follows pretty nicely off what you were just talking about. You've each sort of implied differences in the timeline depending on what kind of project. And of course, like the answer to a lot of questions, I'm sure it could be, well, it just really depends. But could you kind of each of you kind of work on different aspects of films? We're talking about props, we're talking about keyframes, environments, sets versus the visual development side. What's like an average time horizon from when the brief comes in to when they need it? Are you scrambling in like 2 days, or is it 2 weeks? It would just be interesting to hear some specifics, or even a very specific experience.
You mean for the final?
Yeah, like I realize sometimes you're just, okay, we have a month to solve this problem and collaborate with us on it daily, and whatever we get at the end of the month, that's kind of what we got. But like Alex, for example, when you get a keyframe in, sometimes when I hear you talk about it, it sounds like they were about to film it in 3 days and had no idea what it would look like, and they asked me to solve that. Versus when you're redesigning Iron Man, I imagine that happens earlier in the process, and so maybe there's more time, but maybe not. So I guess just getting kind of granular in some ways, but also I think that's really useful kind of information that sometimes it's just hard to kind of suss out, like, how quick do you really have to do this stuff?
Man, that's a great question. It varies. Sometimes it's very relaxed, blue sky, and you have a long time to work on things, and it gets kind of uncomfortable how much freedom you have. Like, is this going to happen? I don't know. I've been spending a week on this scene. This is kind of weird, man. I don't know what the hell's going on. No one's called me for anything. Hey, I'm sending you this email just to show you my work in progress. Dude, they didn't even reply to my email. What the? And then sometimes it's like, so this is a big ask, but can you do this, and that? Can you paint the shoe turning inside out, while at the same time we can tell it's designed by butterfly wings? You're like, what the fuck? And we need it by Thursday. And I know it's Tuesday, so you got today, tomorrow, and it's for Thursday morning, so you have to turn it in Wednesday. So. And in that case, you sort of buckle down and beat your head against the wall until it turns blue. Through those experiences personally, I don't know how I got through it. I always feel like I got lucky, meaning I've been asked an insane amount of work for a short period of time, and I'm not alone. Everybody else is hustling for that. So at least there's a variety of options that are going to be turned into at the end of the day in the meeting. What's even harder is when whoever's asking for it is like, yeah, it has to look photoreal, and then we're like, okay, we have a day. Can we at least turn in ideas, sketches, pencil drawings? And they're like, yeah, they don't know how to read that. So if you can maybe bash it in, it's okay. They'll be, so Yeah, it varies. It really varies with the.
Yeah, I would just say be prepared for the type of like Tuesday to Thursday situation, you know. And if you figure that out, then you're fine for the rest. But you know, be prepared for the worst, you know. But yeah, like there have been projects where I think we all have learned in the hard way, where they are just like this type of situations every week, and there are sometimes some others that are like Alexander said, right, where you don't get any answer for like 3 days or for like a week. And then suddenly everything starts just collapsing, and everyone wants everything done like in 3 days, you know. Like you could be like doing like whatever it is, like on a spaceship design, and then have super mild feedback, like, yeah, can you just do it red? Sure, just changing the material, rendering, done. Yeah, can you just like maybe make that window a tiny bit bigger? Yeah, sure. You know, and you will be doing like feedback like that for maybe 3 weeks, and then suddenly the last week is like, yeah, can you just like do a new one? You know, that's it.
And I want to translate for Alex. When he says get lucky, that loosely translates as pull an all-nighter. And then the next, you know, you get to Wednesday morning, and you know you haven't slept, you haven't bathed, you handed the thing, and then oh, didn't anyone tell you we cut that scene?
Oh yeah. Oh, but that's not happening anymore.
And the opposite of like delivering something fast is like working on one image for a month and a half, and every week you get it back. It's like, hey, can you change this ladder there? Hey man, can you change that there? And you know, like that changes. Like they're brainstorming while rendering and illustrating for a month and a half, and trust me, that image, doesn't matter how good it looks, you fucking hate it so much.
Then there's also another situation, and it's when you are too fast, and then they expect you to do that always. Yeah. You know, so one day you're just, you know, inspired, and instead of one, you deliver 3 images, and then they want 4 images every day. You know, so
Yeah,
oh,
be really
you can do
careful.
3. Okay, then I'm gonna ask you for 5.
Like I said, it's almost like a relationship. You can't give too much in the beginning. Like slowly, you know what I mean? I'm not that easy. One of the things that I did that I usually do, I don't know if it's cheating or whatever, is I really spend extra time on the project the first month and a half, just so they get used to my quality. And then after a month and a half, I start like pushing back. I'm like, no, I'm not gonna do everyday update. I need like 2 days or 3 days. And they have to accept, because the production designer and director like my work. So I'm kind of like working it that way, where I'm making a position for myself, like, no man, I stop at 6, so I don't know if you need it or not, but I work until 6 and that's it. So you have to work your position, yourself to that position.
Actually, sometimes your clients will also ask you, how long does it take you to do this? And then you measure it, you know, and you, of course, you gotta be honest and be like, I did this in like 2 days, or I did it in 3. Or, you know, if it takes you a week, maybe that will make them think like, maybe I need to find someone faster, or, you know, depends.
Yeah, usually I say 3 and then deliver in 2, and then they're like, whoa, you're fast.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think this is the perfect place to wrap this up today.
Me and Pablo are asked, like, guys are real people, like artists. Me and Pablo were like looking for the fast way and like the most laziest way. So come to us if you want advice.
Well, you all, thank you so very much for sharing your stories here with us. Audience, thank you very much. Phil Saunders, Pablo Dominguez, Danar Worya, Pablo Carpio, Naomi Baker, and Alexander Mandradjiev. Thank you all. Go have a wonderful evening on your first night at LightBox. We'll see you all soon.